Oh, welcome back, everyone, to the Below Average Joe's MMA podcast, episode number 172. Your host, as always, I'm Noah Baker. That's Dominic Salee.
Hi.
Dominic, the weekend that was, fights were back, NFL playoffs had started. How you feeling?
I mean, it was a good weekend, just to put it lightly, right? I mean, we branched out, started some new content on the channel last week. We have fights back for the first time in a month, as you said, the playoff football. Your team, Noah, the Bengals, their first playoff win in 31 years
Who
since
day?
before since before Noah was even born. So we got to witness history
The
yesterday. So
first
Noah,
text about the Bengals winning a playoff game was sent yesterday.
yes, in your lifetime. Wow. So I'm doing good, Noah, but I know you're doing great.
Yeah, it feels good. It feels good to kind of get the monkey off the back. Having the longest playoff drought among the four major sports. I mean, come on, man. But no, it felt good. Joe Burrow is my daddy, and I will
Yeah.
continue to respect him as such. So,
Yes.
yeah, we're recording this on Sunday as we always do. So, a lot more games to go on today. I'm excited to watch all of those. Now that I am a big time sports bettor now, I do have a lot of money on these playoff games so far. My first winning ticket ever, though,
This,
was
this is what's
betting.
cool.
I
Yeah.
did bet on the Bengals on the point spread. They were a 6 point favorite. They won by 7. They made it close on me, but
Yeah.
I was able to cash that winning ticket, first ever, for my Cincinnati Bengals. So that felt good. But Dominic, we had fun Saturday. And, the main event is going to take up a lot of the headlines, and that's because really the rest of this card it was hit with a lot of COVID. It was hit with just a lot of shakeup in the last few days, last few weeks. And once the fights, it felt like one of those cards that was going to end up delivering, because usually when those cards that people start to kind of dismiss typically end up over delivering. But this one kind of just played out how it looked on paper, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. At the end of the day, it's still good. Like Noah said, that the fights were back, but it was rather dull. Only 4 prelim fights. They were all decisions. There were only 2 finishes on the whole card. But you know what, man? Now that we're just back, it feels like a routine's going to get kicking. We've got a huge pay-per-view coming up this week with UFC 270. Things are looking upward. I mean, that when you look at that main event, that's good momentum to ride after such a dull card to take into the rest of the year. So
I
I'll
agree.
take it.
Dominic can make a positive spin out of anything. So let's get into those fight announcements. Only a couple here, not 18,
Yeah,
just two.
whew, thank goodness.
A fight that I was really excited for
Yeah.
Saturday's pay per view. Movsar Evloev versus Ilia Topuria. That fight is off. Movsar Evloev, it looks like testing positive for COVID. But the fight is saved as far as for Topuria, as Charles Jourdain will be
Mm.
stepping in. Now, Charles Jourdain, a very intriguing opponent for this fight, because even though he hasn't quite got the shine that Evloev or Tuporia have, he's not quite at that top 15 yet. He does have some very impressive wins, has a very impressive skill set, Dominic. Is he going to be able to kind of make some noise here coming in on 2 weeks' notice?
I think he can definitely make some noise. This is a very, very intriguing fight. And really, stylistically, this might be more of a quote unquote banger than what Evloev versus Tiberi was. And don't get me wrong, I was just as excited for that one as the next guy. 2 undefeated, huge prospects in this featherweight division. But Charles Jourdain stepping in with the big kahunas here to take on Ilia Topuria, someone we're super high on. Jourdain comes in with a lot of power, precision, technique in his striking, not afraid to take some shots, to give some shots. This is still going to be a very hard fight for Topuria, and it's still going to be a great fight for the fans. I'm excited.
Yeah, Charles Jourdain popping up on my radar with his win over Ho Choi back in the day. And
Yeah.
wait, man, not to go off topic, but Ho Choi has not fought since then. That was like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, the Korean Superboy, right?
Yeah, I want to see him back. Damn it.
I know, man.
Anyways, next one here, Kelvin Gastelum will be back at UFC 273 happening on April 9th. He goes up against Nassourdine Imavov. Imavov, one of the newcomers to this top 15. Kelvin Gastelum, a staple of the top of this division, but one that is starting to slip in his placement, Dominic. How important is this fight for Kelvin Gastelum?
This is a big one for Kelvin to kind of maintain that status that he has in this division. And Nassourdine Imavov is a tough matchup for anyone, a phenomenal grappler, but great striking as well. He's kind of just good everywhere. Again, part of that next wave. We've talked about how this division is a bit stale, so this is one of few that are kind of breathing fresh life into it. So obviously a huge opportunity for him as well to beat a former title challenger, a veteran of the fight game, and potentially crack into the top 10.
Yeah, Kelvin Gastelum is one of those guys that I just want to root for. I don't know why that is. I mean, it's not like I follow him any closer than anybody else, but something about his fight style and how close he came to interim gold, and in that fight with Adesanya, that's one of the best fights of all time if you guys have never seen it. And now to see him kind of slip to where now he's like barely in the top 10, it makes me want to root for him so much more. So for Imavov, he's had an interesting run where kind of wrote him off when he lost to Phil Hawes, I believe, in a pretty
lackluster
fight.
Yeah.
But now that fight, you look back on it, and even though it was a lackluster fight, I mean, that fight had a lot of stakes to it, considering now Imavov's shot higher than Phil Hawes has up to this point.
Yep.
So
very true.
Imavov has looked fantastic ever since that fight, and I mean, for the most part, Phil Hawes has as well. So it's very interesting that Imavov definitely riding a wave of hype right now, or at least surging quite a bit. And this is the good test for him to see if he's really top 10 worthy right now.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
So that's going to wrap it up for those fight announcements. We do have a little bit of news, though, before we get into the action from Saturday. And Dominic starts with a familiar name on this show, Alaska Fighting Championship.
Say it ain't so.
Yeah, one of our regional showcase cards involved this promotion. One of our favorites, probably one of the most memorable
yes.
That we'll ever watch. I will never forget the first time I experienced an Alaska FC card and had no idea. It's kind of like watching I wonder have you ever seen the Sixth Sense, the movie?
Yes.
Oh, you have?
Yes, I've seen that.
I was like, I can't believe it. I was like, I wonder why I'm even asking him. Well, the big twist. We're not getting no spoilers, even though that movie came out 30 years ago. But
yeah.
The big twist. Well, I've known about the twist, but I've never actually seen the movie. So I always think of man, I wish I could see that movie without knowing the twist.
Right.
So that's kind of how Alaska FC was for me the first time I watched it. I didn't realize what I was really getting myself into until I watched it, so it made it that much more memorable for me. However, this is not the lovely little promotion as of late, as MMA fighter Dom Merriweather spoke out on his Twitter account this week, and he revealed that AFC had not paid any fighters from their last card. I'm pretty sure that was the card that we watched.
Yep, it was.
The promotion, that being AFC, claimed UFC Fight Pass had not paid them in order to do so. Now, I guess there was some resolution as it stands now. Later, Merriweather would tweet a follow-up saying that AFC had reached out, made it clear all fighters will be paid, and that things will change in the future. Dominic, what does this all mean? How do you feel about this in terms of for the fighters involved and for Alaska Fighting Championship?
I think this story really just does go to show just how hard it is for these smaller startup promotions, these regional promotions, state-specific MMA promotions, man. They get the small sponsors, the local sponsors, which help them kind of stay afloat. But when it comes to paying these athletes what their promised purse is and continuing to put on shows, venues, and everything, they do rely on this UFC Fight Pass money, which why these organizations getting on Fight Pass is such a big deal. So I think this is just really goes to show you how tough it is out there. It's a hard business, especially a sport that, yes, is growing at insane amount levels, but at a small regional kind of location, it's still so hard to kind of get started, get up and running off the ground. So I do hope everything gets sorted out here. Obviously, these fighters need to get paid, and we want to do another regional showcase on Alaska Fighting Championship in the future, man. So I hope it all works out. Hopefully, they can do some more events in 2022.
Well, I will say, if this is going to become a pattern, then I hope that they no longer run events. If you're not paying your fighters, then you shouldn't be running promotion. If you're depending on, to pay the fighters of a card, like, you shouldn't commit to that card if you can't pay them outright. So to sit there and blame UFC Fight Pass for your financial struggles. I mean, I get it. They're kind of a hole in the wall type promotion. From what I've heard, they're kind of like a family owned company type deal, but no excuse for it. There's a lot of stories about scummy promoters out there. The promoters that will take your money and run, offer to pay you just a few $100 to fight, and then all of a sudden you can't find them after the show. This comes off like that to me, and I just wonder how this would have went if Dom Merriweather did not speak out and if this did not gain the traction it did. It kind of hurts my respect for Alaska FC. I wanted to just kind of enjoy this little, low quality promotion, but they have some, they've built up guys like Jared Cannonier and stuff, so they've done a good job of kind of raising their talent level while still kind of, you still see some of these fights on there though, and you got guys with these fucking weird ass tattoos and like they're very much locals, But if this is a sign of things to come, and even if it's not, I think this is a bigger story than maybe. It seemed to pick up some steam and then it kind of got resolved, but I have a hard time wanting to do this promotion again on our show, because if they're not paying their fighters, or if they're waiting for Fight Pass to pay them so they can pay the fighters for a card that they already committed to. I mean, that sounds like a them problem. You committed to these fights. There was 3 of them, by the way, and you're telling me you can't pay the fighters because you didn't get whatever money you were owed by Fight Pass. For one, I find that hard to believe. The UFC being as big as it is, not owning up to the money that they owe a promotion that they air on their platform. And this just comes off to me like this wouldn't have got resolved if someone didn't speak out. So shame on you, Alaska FC. Do better. Pay your fighters. And or stop running promotion. Stop running. Don't be a promotion anymore, scumbags. Right?
Yeah, this story's weird because, like, I don't know, for those that have watched Kingdom out there, it's kind of one of the only MMA shows that there've been, not necessarily a movie. Pretty solid show, if I do say so myself. But this is something that would be on that show, and so as a hardcore fan, before we were getting into like the regional showcases, I watched that series, and I'm like, oh man, is this really a good like depiction of kind of what does go on at that really ground level MMA regional stuff? And then you see, oh well, here's real life, with Dom Merriweather coming out and saying this about the 6 fighters on that card. So it's just it's all very shaky, to say the least.
I mean, maybe for all I know, maybe this is all just a big misunderstanding, and maybe Alaska FC cares more about their fighters than most promotions do, and I'm just being too hard on them. But I kind of doubt it. And the way this show works, I'm sure next week I'll end up having to do a complete 180. But for now, fuck Alaska FC, and we'll see what's next.
On to the next story.
Yeah, so on to the next one here. Dana White did an interview with Aaron Bronstetter of BT Sport, or TSN, I think is what he is on.
Yeah, TSN for Aaron.
Yeah, and in that interview, the topic of Kamaru Usman came up, and really this all started with talking about the main event for UFC 272, being Jorge Masvidal versus Colby Covington. Bronstetter talked about Kamaru Usman and his welterweight title. We haven't really heard from Usman since he defeated Colby Covington in November. He made it very clear he wanted to take some time off, spend some time with family. Those whispers of retirement starting to become a little louder. But definitely looking like we'll see him again. So it was sort of brought up, this kind of leaves the title picture open when you have those two guys fighting each other. And Dana White said 100% Leon Edwards is next for Kamaru Usman. And I'm sure this makes a lot of people just so relieved that he's finally getting this opportunity. So Dominic, do you buy this? Do you think that this is the fight that will be next for Kamaru Usman's title? And how do you feel about Dana White kind of really getting into his corner here in the interview?
I'll believe it when I see it. This is so funny to me because I don't remember. It was like not too long ago, a month or two ago, where it was like, we do have plans for Leon, but it's not a title. But now here we are in this interview, 100% he deserves it. So you know what, man? Maybe they were just kind of waiting to hash out some other details. They did this Colby Masvidal fight. Looks like they're going to go a different route with maybe like Gilbert Burns, Luque, and Chimaev. So now enough is being hashed out behind the scenes that we still don't know about yet, but it is there confidently enough for Dana to say this. And, it is a fight that makes sense. It's a rematch that's going to be 7 years in the making at this point. Leon hasn't lost since. Kamaru's obviously never lost. He's number 3 in the world and obviously the champion, and Usman with 5 title defenses. It should be a fun fight. I know he also said, I don't know if it was in the same interview, or he might have said it in this interview, but I watched his one with BT Sport, and he said Kamaru is looking for coming back in the summer. So that's still, a little ways away. We're talking 5, 6, 7 months until then. So that is still another long layoff for Mr. Leon Edwards, if that's the case. So again, while it's all great and I'm all for Leon getting that title shot, I'll believe it when I see him in the cage together.
Yeah, I'm contrary to maybe what people think. I'm happy about it. I think that's good that Leon Edwards gets the next shot. Based off of who's there right now, I think you do Leon Edwards. I mean, I think he has earned it over Gilbert Burns getting a second shot. I think he's earned it over Vicente Luque or Bilal Muhammad. Why not? So if Leon's okay with being able to wait until the summer, it'd be like a year since he last fought Nate Diaz. I mean, that's fine. Do it. But, there's just a lot of risk here. I mean, again, it's the biggest opportunity you can get in the sport. So you take it no matter what the circumstances are. But, if Leon loses, and quite frankly, if he loses in a dominant fashion, man, I mean, think of the layoff you took and how many the sporadic activity he's had over the last few years, and you just wonder if how far that could set him back for the rest of his career.
Yeah.
It just makes me wonder. But in terms of just Dana White committing to Leon Edwards, I'm all for it. I'm glad that he gave Leon credit about the Khamzat Chimaev fight, even though I was kind of critical of Leon for I don't know. I was a bit critical of him. I don't even kind of remember what exactly it was for. I don't know if it was for acting like that fight was below him, or I forget what it was. But no matter what I said that was critical of him at that point, no doubt about it, he signed to do that fight. And a lot of people apparently have not been signing to fight Khamzat. So
right.
Got to give him credit there. Guys like him and Neil Magny, they're just built different, I guess.
That could be true.
But let's move on into these fights from Saturday night, Dominic. Not too much to go over here, but I think the big one is that main event. Very, very much kind of falling in line with our first main event last year. A one-sided beating, but it's in our fight going to be in fight of the year discussion, it looks like, as Calvin Kattar gets the unanimous decision win over Giga Chikadze, and reminds everyone how good he really is. Said y'all must have forgot.
Yes.
So Dominic, give your thoughts here on Calvin Kattar's performance, and on the reverse end, was this a disappointing showing from the very hyped Giga Chikadze?
Yeah, man. As you know, because of our group chat last night during the fights, I was gushing over Kattar's performance. I mean, definitely the best we've ever seen him look. inside of the UFC octagon, improves to 7-3, bounces back after, obviously the beat down he took against Max Holloway almost 1 year to the day in 2021, comes back after a long layoff. They said that he took like 6 months off from like hard sparring and whatnot after that Max Holloway fight to give his head and brain a rest. And here it is, paying dividends. What a shutout masterclass performance from him. 250-45s, 150-44 scorecard for the amazing fifth round that he had. And it was just his pressure, his pacing, constantly forcing Giga to be on his back foot. Had a great first round where he utilized his wrestling and grappling, really got to showcase kind of how good he is there, kind of a slept-on skill set, and just how poorly that Giga could defend. Now, for what it's worth, Giga did defend the rest of the takedowns throughout the fight, but that was just so perfectly timed by Kattar in the first, and he was able to capitalize on it. But what a fight from Kattar. Again, the best that I've seen him look. For Giga, yes and no in terms of a disappointment, because, again, he just wasn't able to fight his fight. He could not implement what he wanted to do, constantly backpedaling. I think the biggest takeaway from Giga wasn't necessarily that there was any sort of skill set detriment, but his cardio is not up to par for a 5-round fight and to fight these elite-level title contender guys. And I know that not all these guys are going to fight the same pace that Max Holloway does, that Calvin Kattar does, but you still need to be able to compete with those two guys in specific right now when you look at this division to show that you're title fight worthy regardless. And it just wasn't his night last night. He couldn't keep up the pace. He got tired. He tried to press forward, but he was constantly on the bicycle. And again, Kattar just overwhelmed him, overpowered him. What a performance. What a fight. What a night.
It's weird. It's like right away in round one when that takedown happened, that just changed everything immediately.
It did. It did.
Immediately when that takedown took place, I think Chikadze was just a different fighter, and the rest of the way he didn't push forward as much. As like you said, he was kind of on his bike the whole fight. I'm not even sure if this guy has, iffy cardio, or if he simply is just, I mean, if any fighter was doing what he was doing here, I feel like you get tired. I mean, you were on your back pedal the whole time. I was trying to give Calvin Kattar this credit in the lead up, even though I was kind of like the majority opinion. I was sort of leaning Chikadze. I still felt like the aggression of Calvin Kattar, a guy who will get in your face, get into range, was a threat, and it really proved to be so. It seems that Chikadze is very comfortable when he can keep things at like a distance, and he can push forward, but he just does a lot of teep kicks and stuff like that, and really keeps you at bay, a lot of body work,
Well, that's the thing, too. Kattar is able to eliminate essentially all of the kicks,
Yeah, and then Kattar, being much more comfortable in that boxing range, obviously, New England cartel. And that was the big difference, man. When this fight was in a boxing range, in the pocket, Calvin Kattar was throwing together some beautiful combinations. And while Chikadze landed as a fair share, they were much more looping, a little less technical, and that just made a huge difference. So a combination of factors here, and it was a tough night for Chikadze. It really was. And while I still am very high on his upside, and I think this fight to me answered a lot more about Calvin Kattar than it did about Giga Chikadze. I mean, I don't think this fight said that. I saw a lot of people being like, well, this proves that Korean Zombie was the right fight over Giga. I'm not even in that debate, but I'm not saying, like, if Giga fought Alexander Volkanovski, I'm not saying that Volkanovski would do what Calvin Kattar just did. It's all about the matchups.
Yes.
But this fight was a reminder of how good Calvin Kattar is. And I guess, and I really didn't want to say this because I just want to focus on how good Calvin Kattar looked. But I guess by how good he looked, it kind of makes you go, how good is fucking Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski? I can't help it. Like, when you just see Calvin Kattar basically do to Giga, to a lesser extent what Max did to Calvin a year before. Yeah. I mean, it's just, I'm not saying Chikadze, if he fights either of those two, he doesn't, make it a close fight or win. I'm just saying that I walked away going, well, Calvin Kattar is one of the best in the division. I'm like, but man, when you look, I don't like that. There's a big tier gap.
Yeah.
as good as this division is, I think 1 and 2, Volk and Max are just like a level. Because you look at what Max did to like Brian Ortega and what Volk did to Brian Ortega. And, you know, Yair Rodriguez put up a really good fight. But really, a lot of these guys are, you know, as good as they are, man, they're kind of fighting for bronze right now.
Yeah, they are.
So until proven otherwise, or until maybe Max or Volk leave the division or whatever it might be, that was just what I kept thinking about. I hate it because I want to focus on Kattar. I think this was the bounce back he needed, obviously. It couldn't have went better for him. He sweeps the cards. Even had a 10-8 on one of those cards. He should be due for a pretty big matchup next. You know, the UFC's already given him, I think this was his 3rd headlining fight night. So he's very clearly a headlining act on those fight night circuits now. So I've been seeing a lot of matchups tossed out there. I personally would probably match him up with, I'd probably go with Yair Rodriguez.
Oh, you pick him over Brian Ortega, huh?
Yeah, I think Brian Ortega might go for someone like, I like him versus like Josh Emmett or something like that.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, really, all 4 of those guys could intertwine perfectly with one another.
Yeah, I mean, if they did Kattar versus Ortega,
yeah,
I'm going to be stoked. It's really, you just kind of throw darts at the board and whatever it lands on, you just go with. I mean,
yeah,
it's that simple. I'm sure the UFC will make a more diligent decision, but from our perspective, our matchmaking, you know, that's really the most you can do with that. And for Chikadze, it is a disappointing showing. I mean, he could have lost this fight and it not been disappointing. But, you know, I do think he showed a lot of heart. He showed a lot of obviously a great chin. He showed, even if his cardio didn't hold up, he didn't quit ever in this fight.
Nope.
And I think those are going to be great attributes as far as for him to make a bounce back of his own. But in terms of his actual ability, which is something we prided him on, you know, his striking, there's more holes there than, you know, was let on than coming in. There was more holes than the discussion had. And, I'm sure he'll try to find ways to either try to avoid getting into that kind of boxing range, or he will, you know, try to make that better. I do worry a little bit about if he goes up against guys who look to take him down a lot, look to level change a lot. He doesn't seem to have the best takedown defense in the world, and I almost wonder when I was watching this, because Kattar got that first one so easy. He didn't really look like he was trying to take down Chikadze as much as he was trying to force Chikadze to work, force him to fight off the takedown and tire him out that way. So kind of remains to be seen for me if Chikadze can really stay off his back if he's going up against a very good grappler.
Yeah, and it did show that, you know, regardless of the takedown defense, if you can land the one, you're likely he's not going to get back up. So you're going to have a lot of control time. You're going to be able to work for ground and pound. You're going to be able to work for submission. So it may not even come down to 1, 2, 3, 4 takedowns. So you could have one and make a huge impact on the remainder of the fight, or make a stamp if it comes late in the fight there. So yeah, there were definitely vulnerabilities shown that we hadn't necessarily seen yet. And with a guy like Chikadze that was surging so quickly and had all this hype, it is kind of like a blessing in disguise almost, just to kind of see, okay, what can he go back and work on? What version are we going to see next when he fights again? So
Now let's get into a fight a little lower on the main card. Those flyweights, man. I actually thought this was a great fight.
It was.
There was some definite something that clouded over it in my head, but ultimately Brandon Royval gets the split decision win over Rogerio Bontorin. And this is one of those fights where both guys kind of have positive takeaways, I think. When this fight was standing, this was all Royval.
Yeah.
All Royval. I mean, he looked exceptional on the feet. Now, Bontorin did land some heavy shots. He definitely is more of a counterpuncher and definitely has a lot of power for this division. And he showed that. Royval keeping his chin open a little too much. Bontorin was landing some heavy blows. But overall, Royval putting the combinations together, doing some really interesting stuff, a lot of spinning, like elbows and stuff like that. I thought it looked great. But Bontorin, man, when it comes to his wrestling, that
So
guy is
strong,
powerful,
physical,
man, so strong, and really just doesn't allow any distance between him and his opponent when it gets to the ground. With that being said, though, I thought Royval did a good job on his back. I saw on the broadcast they were saying they thought his guard was too loose or something like that, but I just liked how active he was. You know, for Bontorin, who's literally looking to hold him down and try to slow things down, and Royval just refusing to, let up for a second.
Yeah, he's looking to get up. He's looking to submit you. He's looking to elbow you from the bottom. He's the most busy fighter.
I was so impressed with that. And I scored the fight for Royval. You could have made an argument for Bontorin, but ultimately I thought round one, I gave it to Royval. Even though the 2 takedowns Bontorin had, I felt like Bontorin didn't do a lot of damage with either of those, outside of, I guess, the slam on the one.
Yeah.
And while Royval was throwing elbows from the bottom, was throwing up submission attempts, I mean, he just a more active fighter in that round. And on the feet, he was, again, getting the better of the exchanges. So, Dominic, I guess we'll just start the discussion by, Royval kind of getting back on track. Ultimately, it's a good fight. Both guys kind of having those positive takeaways. Was there anything else that stuck out to you about this fight?
Really, it was kind of how you said Royval looked so good in the striking, and I felt it was because, man, he looked so long and loose last night. That reach was really playing a factor. He was hitting Bontorin where he couldn't come in and hit him. So, yeah, I mean, it was just a really good performance again. He's just so busy. He's constantly moving, whether it is on the feet, on the ground. That's why he's never in a dull fight. And again, like you said, for Bontorin, being that the fight could have went his way, I wouldn't have been surprised if it did go his way. There's not necessarily a negative takeaway for him. Not to mention, he made weight successfully. There were no issues there. So maybe he's kind of getting that frame together. And I think he could be a guy that could still be a legit contender down the road. And, of course, Raw Dog getting the win. He's right there in the top 5 anyways. So.
Yeah, now let's talk about referee Mark Smith here, because there was a moment in round 3 where Brandon Royval got Bontorin in a armbar.
Deep
armbar. And immediately there was what looked, I'll say from my perspective, I saw a tap from Bontorin.
Yeah.
Mark Smith misses it. Fight continues. Nothing really comes of it. There's no review after the fight. Nothing. Dominic, did you think that this was a tap? And I'm curious, do you feel, even though the right guy, I guess, won in that case, if you did think it was, is this was this something that should have been made a bigger deal out of?
Yeah, so in real time, it was one where it made me go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute here. But then they kind of go on. You hear the commentary saying, what happened there? There wasn't much left in the fight, so the fight comes to a conclusion. They show the replay to us, not the review and all that stuff, but on TV. And when you see the replay, you're like, okay, there was one pretty clear tap. He looked at the ref like he was wanting to get his attention. His arm was almost hyperextended. I mean, it was a nasty, really good armbar. But he was able to kind of, I don't know if Bontorin was like, oh, he didn't see it. And then he was able to actually fight out of it. So, again, I guess Mark, at the end of the day, did not see it. I don't know kind of what goes on then. So when the fight concludes, if Mark never saw this happen, I guess he wouldn't technically know.
He could be made aware of it.
He can be made aware of it.
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of how I was looking forward to. So yeah, I would have been curious to see had they made that known to him. And I know you have even deeper thoughts. You kind of had a tweet about it as well, so I'll let you go a little bit more deeper into that.
Because I think when Big Dan missed the headbutt, I think that's I know I criticized him because he obviously was aware that there was a headbutt. He just didn't stop it. I don't know. But after the fight, I believe there were, because they have the other refs, they're on standby kind of.
Yeah.
So I think someone told him, and that's what made him look at the replay.
And they reviewed it.
I don't know if anybody said anything to Mark Smith. But here's my thing. This was the reason why this pisses me off. And it's not even unfortunately for Mark Smith, he's kind of being caught in the crosshairs of another thing that I've been kind of annoyed about. There's been this growing part of the community that's been critical of referee Herb Dean. Late stoppages, early stoppages, whatever it might be. And you have every right to say, something about that if that's how you feel. If you see some stoppage that you think is late, you can say something. If you it totally subjective, I guess, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But I think sometimes it's become so popular to criticize Herb Dean that I think that's what people keep leaning into. Guys, this is real time, real decision making in the heat of the moment.
Yeah.
They're not always going to be perfect. And I'm not saying that Herb has had his tough moments. He has, and you can be critical of that. He needs to improve on that. But every stoppage, it seems like nowadays, gets...
Yeah.
I see a comment that's like, that was a little too quick, or that was a little... I'm like, guys, do you really want to do that job? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when this happened Saturday, and overall Royval ends up winning the fight, but that fight should have been ended. It should have been a submission victory for Brandon Royval.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see... I saw a few accounts tweeting about it, but the majority of people were just kind of brushing it off like, well, Royval won, the right guy won, so I guess we can move on.
Yeah.
No. Hold on a second.
He's picking up the mic.
If this was Herb Dean who had done that, would you guys have just let it go? Because I don't think so.
Answering people.
I don't think so at all. I think if you say so, I think you're a fucking liar. because people have found every reason to be critical of Herb Dean, and to the point where they are completely focused on being hypercritical of every decision he makes. Some of those are for right reason. A lot of them are just, for my opinion, unjust. And then here, something that really could have affected the outcome of a fight that was clearly won by one guy in that moment, could have been taken away by a split decision. Bontorin could have won that fight.
Yeah, he was one judge away from winning the fight.
And nobody seemed to say anything. There was
no
instant. And he even had an opportunity to go back to instant replay, and it didn't happen. I call bullshit to the MMA community. Be better. Be even with your criticism. Mark Smith deserves criticism for that one.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to be critical of one, you need to be critical of all. Don't just do to the big dog, to Herb Dean, because he's the biggest of the refs, the one that is the most popular. I don't like that.
Let's hold them all to the same playing field here.
So I'm just calling out. It's a bit hypocritical, I think, for people to take that. I get it. Late stoppage. You're talking about someone's quality of life maybe could be in question at times. But this, if Brandon Royval lost this, he'd be 2-3. This was a fight that was going to get him back on track. This is hurting someone's career here too.
A win bonus.
Yeah, this affects a lot of people.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to talk about fighter pay. Well, that could have stopped someone from getting half their money for a win bonus. I just think that there wasn't a lot of talk about it, and I just don't really agree with that. I don't know.
Thank you, Noah, for speaking up. Speaking your
Mark
mind.
Smith, I don't even want, overall, the right guy won. I'd be okay with, just give, slap on the wrist. Be better next time. That's it. That's all you got to say. That's all that I want people to say.
Right.
I'm not saying you got to, say the guy shouldn't ref anymore, or that he's washed up like everybody does. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying call it out.
Mm-hmm.
You can do it for one, do it for all.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. Next up, last but not least, Katlyn Chookagian. She had a rematch with Jennifer Maia, and she wins once again via unanimous decision. Dominic, that's a UFC record.
Yes.
Katlyn Chookagian, 10 UFC wins, all via decision.
How about that?
when I read that, I must say, like, it doesn't matter. A win is a win. But part of me is like, is this like a backhanded record? Like, does this say something about, like, is this more of like a critique on her fight style than it is an actual, like, a record for her victories here? But regardless, Dominic, a good performance, I will say. And this was a fight that was better than I thought it was going to be. Both women came in here looking a little extra motivated to you know, try to win this fight and, put themselves in a better position to potentially, challenge the champion Valentina Shevchenko again, even though most of the fans are probably not wanting that. And Katlyn Chookagian, once again, comes out on top. And this ends up leading us to an interesting discussion because she sets that record. She is clearly like a clear third best fighter in the division right now, behind Andrade and Shevchenko.
Yeah.
And yes, there's more on the way. I know, Dominic. I get it. You got all your ladies down that are prospects that are on their way up. But right now, clear number 3, clear gatekeeper. Her contract just ended with the UFC after last night. So,
it did.
Yeah. And they talked about this in the post-fight presser. Since you must not have watched Dana's post-fight presser. Okay. So nothing really of note, but when asked about Chookagian getting a new contract, he said, we'll see. Very vague on it. Didn't act like, wasn't all that. He said Hunter, I think, or no, maybe it was Hunter was the one that did the contract with her. I can't remember. But regardless, her contract's up. So you can give your thoughts about her performance, but ultimately what the question here is, Dominic, is does Chookagian find herself with another contract in the UFC?
Yeah, performance was really what I would expect from Katlyn Chookagian. I talked about Friday how she's so great at managing her long reach and range. She picks her shots. She lands her shots. She's a solid grappler, was able to implement a game plan. Jennifer Maia was not able to. And boom, she did it 2 years ago. She does it again today. She's now on a 3-fight win streak again. But as you said, this is the last fight on her contract, which I didn't know. So it's interesting because honestly, this is just such a weird spot to be in where you're Katlyn Chookagian, you're 10-4 in the UFC. Great record, right? A lot of people wish they could have 10 wins inside the UFC octagon. But you've been there against Valentina Shevchenko. You didn't even present a challenge to her. You got stopped in that fight. You've kind of had other faults in the road, but you've proven you are better than basically everyone else that's close to you in the rankings right now until some of those others that we talk about occasionally will come up. But that's still a little ways away. So what do you do in the meantime? I mean, she's already fought Andrade. She lost to her. Has she fought Lauren Murphy? Anybody know? But either way, you can't even do that fight now because Lauren Murphy's fighting Miesha Tate. So really, the more I look at it now, I almost wish the UFC would have waited on the whole Lauren Murphy, Miesha Tate thing and did Miesha versus Katlyn Chookagian. That's a more interesting matchup to me personally. But, for what it's worth, I hope she gets a contract in the UFC. I hope she stays there. She's a good fighter. She can work her way back to another title fight. I'm not saying she's ever going to be a champion, but there's a plethora of people that have made a living in a career in the UFC that have been elite level fighters in their respective division but never held a belt. So I'll be curious to see what the UFC does. And it really is just like, she's in a spot where, what do we do with you? What do you want to go back to 135? You started your UFC career there. Are you interested in dabbling up there since you're kind of, big enough to compete there? So we'll see what happens, but a good performance by her. She got a win. Like I said, 3 in a row. She sets the record, as Noah mentioned. And I do hope, inevitably, she does re-sign a contract with the UFC.
Yeah, I actually thought I saw more from her here than I have out of her last few fights. I thought she lost her fight this summer against Viviane Araújo. I thought Viviane won that fight. So for her to come in here, and I actually was surprised by how entertained I was by her grappling here. She is a much more entertaining wrestler than she is a striker, which is kind of crazy. But I admittedly am not the most entertained by Katlyn Chookagian, but that's not really what matters because this is a sport. So if it's a sport, she's clearly one of the best in the division, regardless of how entertained one might be. But that's the UFC doesn't really roll like that either. They're a sport, but they definitely make decisions based on what's financially viable and the best move financially. So now that her contract's up, the question of will she be brought back? Well, let's work this out, okay? Can she be a champion? Probably not. I mean, Valentina.
And that's that's not even on her. It's because of who the champion is.
Yes, but even if Valentina left and went to bantamweight, I don't think I don't think she'll ever be the best fighter in this division. There's too many strong competitors coming up who have much more diverse and much more well-rounded skill sets. And Andrade is already better. So I don't think she'll ever be a champion. So, okay, she's not a champ. She's never going to be a champion for you, at least if that's the mentality that the UFC is taking. Well, then what is she here for? Because right now she's kind of just beating everybody that you would potentially have in a title fight. People, fresh matchups for the champion. Viviane Araújo not able to get past her, so instead she kind of holds that place at third, but nobody's really able to get past her to get to Valentina. So it's a bit like, why am I blanking on the name now? It's a bit like when John Fitch was at welterweight, and he was a guy that was looked at as a very boring fighter, and he lost like one fight after being on this long win streak, and the UFC just cut him.
Yeah.
Truthfully, I don't think Katlyn Chookagian is coming back. That's just my opinion. I think they would have already signed her to a new contract if they were going to emphasize bringing her back. I think she'll go to somewhere like Bellator and probably have a good last run in her if she wants to do that. But I don't think that the UFC values what she brings to this division right now. She's a gatekeeper. She'll weed out, I guess, she'll beat fighters that you don't want her to beat, and she'll lose the people that you want her to look more competitive against.
Yeah.
So because of that, I don't think that she really is bringing anything into UFC's eyes outside of some headaches for trying to get some legitimate contenders for Valentina Shevchenko.
That's interesting.
So a good career, I don't want to I know this is a bit of a downer spin, and one that is a bit, I guess, in some ways critical of her, but I do think she had a good career, and if this is the last time we see her in the UFC, I hope the best for her. And former title challenger, she earned it all, 10 wins. Don't matter if it's via decision or not, she did it. A lot of women go to a decision. A lot of men fight to a decision. It happens.
Yeah.
So I think she was a good fighter, and if the UFC probably should bring her back, but I just don't see why they would.
That makes sense.
Do you think differently on that, or are you kind of on the same
I
page?
mean, I think she will. I think we'll see her again. But the more I was kind of sitting and thinking as you were going, I'm like, honestly, especially if I don't know what kind of the bantamweight picture looks like with like Amanda and whatnot. But if Katlyn wants to kind of rejuvenate herself and maybe kind of help her case in contract negotiations, what's wrong with going up to 135 again like you did years ago and trying to become a player there? Because if you're not interested or going to look like for a title shot at 125, might as well try your hand at 135 again.
Yeah, and see, my only thing about that, and you're right, that could be something that she could throw at him to maybe, because right now it's not just really her fight style. Because I enjoyed this fight with Jennifer Maia, but this is a fight that happened 2 years ago. She's kind of running through. She's run out of people to really fight in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned Lauren Murphy, but I'm like her versus Lauren Murphy does nothing. It does nothing. Her versus Miesha Tate's interesting. I will admit that. Like that one's kind of like, oh, okay. But if she goes to bantamweight, yes, it's a lot of fresh matchups, but is adding someone who's already been one of the most stagnant parts of this flyweight division to the most stagnant women's division, is it really putting any fresh life into it, or is it pretty much just like, well, here's another person who can't seem to get over the hump. Let's put them along with the rest of them here. You know, it's just I don't know. But I would be interested in seeing her fight people like Holly Holm or Jermaine Durandamy or whoever. I wouldn't be against it.
We'll see.
Yeah, but that's gonna wrap it up for the weekend recap edition. Let us know your thoughts on these fights, and obviously let us know your thoughts as the pay-per-view next Saturday, UFC 270 upcoming. Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane. Brandon Moreno versus Davison Figueiredo 3. But the week ahead, we'll be back on Thursday with the second edition of The Nosebleeds.
That's right.
This time for UFC 270, so we're going to have some nice discussion there on the betting side of that card. And then Friday we'll be here for the preview, episode 173 of the podcast. Give you the X's and O's, the stories, everything you need to know before you watch Saturday night. So Dominic, until then, tell the good people where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, at DSlee14. More importantly, go follow, go engage, go interact with us, with the show, on Twitter, on Instagram, at BAJ_MMA podcast.
And as for me, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, at NTBaker_. If you go to my bio, there is a link. It will take you to a link tree.
That's right.
That will present you with a list of links to all the platforms the podcast is on, along with social media platforms. So that includes...
It's not limited to.
Kind of is. The Twitter, the Instagram, the YouTube channel, and Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcast. It's all on there. And there's a couple links for today's sponsor, Anchor.
Shout out.
First, leaving a voice message. Please do it. Let us know your thoughts. Ngannou, Ciryl Gane. Who's going to win? What's going to happen with Ngannou? If Ngannou loses, is he leaving the UFC? Is he going to go box Antonio Brown? Let us know.
Right. Yes. Again, guys, Joey's on the line here. Don't forget. Still waiting. First voice message of 2022. Who's going to do it? That's the thing. True. Who's got the kahunas?
Who's got the webbles? Second. If you would like to become a supporter of the podcast, just provide us with a little dash, a little razzle dazzle, and any and all support will be appreciated. So that's it. We're out, and we'll see y'all on Thursday.